Hey, today we're going to be replacing the rear brakes on this 2010 Volkswagen Jetta TDI. The steps that we're going to go through today should be applicable to any Mark V generation Jetta, which I think is 2009 to some years after. So if your brakes look like this, then these steps should follow, or if you follow these steps, it should work. Before we begin, I wanted to warn people that these cars actually came with two different incompatible sets of brakes. There's a 260 or a 272 millimeter rotor, pad, and caliper combination. And if you put the wrong one on the wrong car, you will have a bad day, as I did. Depending on which auto parts store you go to, they may recommend you the wrong ones. Oh really, Advanced Auto Parts? Both of these incompatible parts are an exact fit for my car, huh? And so you really need to check this before you buy anything. The way to check this would be either to measure the outer diameter of your rotors and see if they're 260 or 272 millimeter, but an easier way is to just take the wheel off and look at the pads. The pad designs are very different, and if you look on somewhere like ID Parts that carries a lot of Volkswagen stuff or ECS Tuning, you should be able to just match up your pads to the ones you see on the website, buy those, and you should be good to go. As far as jacking this car goes, it can be a little difficult because it's a unibody. It just has a pinch weld running across. It doesn't actually have a frame. So there's a couple tricks. There's little divots on the side skirts here. Those divots are where there's a reinforced jack point underneath the car. It's that extra bit of metal right here. But that's intended to be used for your jack stands or for a lift, not necessarily for your floor jack. If you just take one of these floor jacks with a cup-shaped end on it, put it on there and lift, you may actually bend or damage that. And then you won't have anywhere to put a jack necessarily to rest the car on while you're doing the work. So what I've been doing is using a hockey puck, and the hockey puck protects the pinch weld that runs all along the body, and then you just move your jack over just enough that you'll be able to get your jack stand in on the jack point, and then you lift with the hockey puck and you don't actually do any damage to the pinch weld. Again, if you just lift from that pinch weld and don't have a hockey puck on here or some kind of spacer or something to distribute the weight, the edges of this cup are going to bend up your pitch weld and it'll look crappy. If you've worked on any unibody car that's older and you didn't do all the maintenance yourself, it probably has a really messed up pinch weld. That's why. People use it in one of these floor jacks without anything to distribute it, and just all the weight is on the edges and it buckles. Okay, so we got the car up in the air. First we have to take off these stupid caps. There's a tool the car comes with to do it. I'm just using a punch to do it. I'm using an impact to take these off. If you don't have an impact, you're going to want to loosen all these lug nuts before you lift the car off the ground. Otherwise it's just going to rotate on you. So. Take the tire off. And then whenever you got the car in the air, I always like to put the tire under the car just to act as an additional emergency support in case something happens, falls off the jack stand. Make sure to put it this side down so you don't scrape up your rim though. There we go. Just in case. This is the grodulated brake disc I've got on here. It is definitely past due. This has 110,000 miles on it, and thus we are replacing it. First thing, we got to get the caliper off. The caliper is held on with two 13mm bolts that go into these slides. Break those free. On the actual slide, there's a square piece for you to counterhold with. Because if you just, once you break that free, if you start spinning it, a lot of times it'll just, the slide will rotate. So you counterhold with a 19 on the little square that you can see on the slide boot. And take this piece off. And it should just come out. Okay. Set that aside. Do the same thing here on the bottom. There we go. Okay. With those two out, should be able to just work the caliper off of the caliper hanger, or the caliper carrier. Ugh. Ta-da! Under normal circumstances, you don't want to hang this caliper by the brake hoses. You want to hang it up with wire or something. On this car, it's actually a braided cable for the park brake that it's kind of sitting on right now. The brake cable is not actually, or the brake hose is not in tension, so it's not actually holding it up. We'll just set that aside for a second. Now we need to take the actual caliper carrier off, and this is kind of the bitch part of this job. It's held on the back with two M14 XZN or triple square bits, which are a specialty bit that Volkswagen uses, probably BMW uses, but only a few manufacturers use. So you will need those to do this. This is laying on the ground, looking at the back of the rear hub, whatever you want to call this. XZN bolts are these two. Here's one of them up here, and there's one of them right here. These two you need to take off. They may be kind of rusted on there. They were on the other side, so you may need an impact, which can be very difficult given the weird angle and all of the crap behind them that you need to work around. Holy cow, this is loud. Huh. Not what I was expecting. Okay. Well. Don't let this give you the wrong idea about that Milwaukee impact. It is still a very powerful and capable tool, but the combination of using a U-joint, a long extension, and the very badly rusted bolts, and it just wasn't the right tool for the job. Though, you'll see I didn't have the right tool for the job anyways. Okay, we're gonna have to do this with a breaker bar, I think. But a breaker bar didn't work either. It's too low to the ground and there's too much stuff in the way to try to snake one in there. The only thing that I could actually get to fit was a long handle, half-inch flex head ratchet. Definitely not the right tool for the job, but sometimes you have to do what you have to do to get it done. Well, hopefully people have seen this unorthodox technique. I ended up wedging myself against the ground, sort of, and then pushing with my foot to break it free. It was the only way I could generate that much force in such a weird angle and low to the ground. Yeah, there we go. Man, there's just rust pouring out here. This is what the caliper bracket bolts I removed ended up looking like. Horrible. There's definitely something wrong either between materials or possibly ingress of moisture with the design Volkswagen has for these caliper bracket bolts. The caliper slide pin bolts looked nothing like this. They were nice and clean, and they're just a few inches away. Make sure to get new ones of these when you replace your brakes. I don't think you'll be able to reuse them. Or if you can, you shouldn't. Alright. We're in. There's the caliper bracket off. Set that aside. Grab a T30 Torx. Zip this little screw off. And your hub may need a little convincing. There you go. Hub is free. Look at that. Ugh. we're almost ready to start reassembling it. What I'm going to do really quick is just clean up this hub. I got this little roll-lock tool from Milwaukee. These roll-lock discs are really cool. They're really good for surfacing and conditioning metal. And let's just give this a quick whack. Okay. That looks a lot better. Give it a quick whack with a very fine bristle sander, I guess, or roll-lock sander. And there you go. Okay. Now we're ready to put the new rotors on. These are covered in cosmoline or some kind of gross crap, so I'm just going to spray them down with some brake cleaner. Okay, that's a little better. Now these are painted rotors, so they actually have a coating on them to try to prevent some of the rust. I mean, you saw how horrible that other rotor looked. So hopefully this one will look a little bit better in another 100,000 miles. But I've seen some people talk about taking this coating off. You don't want to take this coating off. If the coating wasn't going to stay on the rotor, the first time you apply the brakes, it'll come off. So if it's supposed to come off, it'll come off when you hit the brakes pretty much the first time. And if it's not supposed to come off, well then leave it on there. So to line these up, you just got to line up the little hole where that torque screw is. And hold the hub while you rotate it into place. So get it lined up. And just get that screw started. One thing to note, when you're tightening this screw, do not tighten it very tight. It really just needs to be snugged up to hold the disc from wobbling. It's not load bearing, it doesn't hold the disc on. When the actual caliper is on here, it's clamped around it and the disc is not going to fall off. So don't tighten this too tight. On the other side, I broke the head off of it and had to use an easy out to get it out. So don't do what I did. Okay, so that's the disc totally done. One other thing, you probably could put some anti-seize on the face of the hub here. And by that I mean totally not that. You could put anti-seize on the back of the rotor / on the face of the hub, and that might help it to come off in the future, but it's really pretty easy to knock it off with a hammer. It's really probably not necessary. This has a caliper with an integrated park brake, and because of that, the piston cannot just be compressed with a C-clamp or whatever. You can't just squeeze this back in. It has to be rotated in as it goes in. For that, I have a whole set of tools, a whole toolkit, with a bunch of little discs that all fit under this jobby. Basically what you're trying to do is find a disc in the kit that will mount into there's usually 2 little grooves or possibly 4 grooves depending on your caliper, that it can grab onto and twist. In my case, I'm using a 7. If you have the exact same Astro Pneumatics kit that I've got, 7 is a decent fit. It's a little loosey though, so you can still find another one that'll work. Lots of them in the kit will actually work, just they'll be looser or tighter. The whole time that you're compressing this thing, you have to keep backing this nut here back to keep pressure on it, otherwise it'll just fall out. I really don't know why these aren't a ratcheting tool, or why they don't just put a female square drive on the end so you could put whatever ratchet you want on the end to crank it down. You'll know when you reach the end when it will not move anymore. It has a hard stop. Yeah, there you go. Don't try to force it, but you'll definitely feel an increase in resistance. Next, we're going to replace the clips and install the new pads. Pads just plop out. Just pull on them. The clips, you should have got a set of clips with your brakes. These are directional. They really won't let you put them on wrong though. They just pull off. And the new ones just press back on in the same spots. Pretty straightforward. I'd recommend not wearing gloves for this part. There we go. Looking much better. In addition, while you got it off here, you want to check these slides. Make sure that the slides are moving freely. They're not stuck. Look at the boots. Make sure that the boots are in good nick. They're not, degraded. You don't see any caliper slide grease coming out or anything like that. These ones look good. It's ready to get put back on. Installation is the reverse of distillation. No. I think if you're able to get them off, you'll figure out where they go. Okay. That's the caliper bracket mounted again. The two XCN triple square bolts in the back, the torque spec on them is 66 foot-pounds. Good luck snaking a torque wrench back here. If you can do it, get them to 66 foot-pounds. If you can't, get them to pretty tight. Torque them to pretty tight. Alright, now the pads. At least these pads are not, there's no front and back. They're identical part numbers. So they just fit into the brackets here. You kind of have to push them a little bit. And there we go. And on the back. And there we go. I should mention at this point that a lot of people like to put lube on the face of the pad that touches the piston inside of the caliper. I like to put anti-seize on the carrier clips themselves, and here's my reasoning. I've seen people say that they want to put grease on the pad because they want it to stay stuck to the caliper piston. And they don't want the piston to retract and have the pad stay touching the disc because then you get a squeak or a squeal. Well, the piston itself doesn't really retract, it just stops applying force. And the pad gets pushed back by the rotation of the disc. So it's very unlikely that the piston would retract and the pad would stay stuck. The reason why the pad might not move away from the disc when you stop applying hydraulic pressure is because it's stuck in the carrier clip. So by lubricating the carrier clip, it allows the pads to slide sideways away from the disc easier. At least that's my rationale. And you may be wondering why I didn't do it in this video. Well, that's because I'm doing an experiment. I did it on the other side, and I didn't do it on this side, and I'm going to see if one side squeaks or squeals more than the other. And by that, I mean I forgot to do it on this side. If you spin your rotor, it should still spin. It might be a little bit of resistance. If your rotor is seized solid, you've done something wrong. Which is how I figured out the whole 260mm, 272mm thing I mentioned at the start of the video. I got to this point in this repair, tightened the caliper carrier up, and the rotor was just totally stuck solid, wouldn't spin. And I realized something has gone horribly wrong. I took everything off, put the old stuff back on. Here I am doing this repair again. The worst kind of repair, the kind of repair you have to do twice. Okay, now that we've got the pads on, all that's left is to put the caliper back on. This should be pretty self-explanatory. Just push the slides in so it will clear, and the caliper just sets up like that. Just reinstall your 13mm caliper bolts. You'll probably have to counter hold the slides again with the 19mm once it starts to tighten up. Okay, caliper bolts put back in. Torque spec on these is, I think, 26 foot-pounds, or just a little tight. It's pretty easy to strip these slides, and then, it's 9:30 at night, you're trying to finish this up, and you strip the slide, and all the auto parts stores are closed, so don't do that. Don't go nuts on these caliper slides. Also, earlier, if your caliper slides did not slide freely, you'll want to take the boot off. The boot just kind of pops off if you pull on it a little bit. Take the slide out, clean it, re-lubricate it, stick it back in, pop the boot back on, and go. If that doesn't work, replace the slides. But, okay, I think we're done. We got everything tightened up. Only thing left is put the wheel back on and go for a test drive. I'm going to use the low torque setting on this thing just to snug them up before putting them on the ground for final torque. It's kind of amazing how civilized this tool is on the low torque mode. It barely makes a peep, or a bang, or a whatever an uncivilized thing would do. Finally, I'm going to torque these lug nuts. I'm torquing them to 100 foot-pounds. I think the rating is 95, but I'm just going to go for 100 foot-pounds. And away we go. Alright, that's it. We're all bundled up. Before you take it for a test drive, make sure to pump the brakes to seat the piston of the caliper against the brake pads. Other than that, should be ready to go. I'll have a full write-up on my website with maybe some more pictures, probably some more description of some of these processes, and a full list of the tools that are needed to do this job. There'll be a link to that in the description. So, yeah, good luck.